Most of the suffering we go through in life, it doesn't actually come from the unpredictable events themselves, not the diagnosis or the job loss.
No, not from the events.
Right. It's from the relentless, frantic effort we put in to try and make everything certain. To me, that's the real paradox we have to start with, the hidden cost of all this certainty we're chasing.
It's a perfect diagnosis of modern life, isn't it? We all operate under this assumption that if we could just plan everything, predict the future perfectly, then all our anxiety would just vanish.
But it's the opposite.
It's the complete opposite. The suffering isn't in the event, it's in the frantic effort, as you said, the struggle against the event.
And that creates a very specific kind of trap. Because the moment you think you finally grab some control, you've got the job, the plan, the relationship, you instantly become controlled by something else.
Which is the fear of losing it.
Exactly. The fear of change, the fear of making a mistake, the terror of losing your way, and that feeling, that constant low-grade fear, it's just exhausting.
Well, and society conditions us to want it. We're taught, from a very young age that certainty means success. It means you're mature, you're wise.
Oh, absolutely. The successful adult is the one who knows.
Who has the 5-year plan, who never deviates.
Right.
We reward that kind of rigidity, and we punish a lack of definition.
I see it all the time, especially with younger people. You're 22 and you're expected to have your whole life mapped out. If you say, I'm not sure, I'm exploring, that's seen as, what, immaturity?
A lack of focus, yeah. And it completely ignores this deeper reality, the one that, thinkers like Jung have pointed to for ages. We're trying to force life to operate on the logic of a spreadsheet.
Neat, ordered, rational.
But psychologically, we're not driven by that. We're guided by the unconscious. And that's a symbolic, messy, powerful realm, full of impulses or forces we can't possibly control.
So you're trying to jam this chaotic living thing into a fixed box.
And that's the source of all the tension.
Okay, so if we know this, at least intellectually, that life is unpredictable, why do we still seek certainty with such desperation? I mean, why do we default back to this mode of control all the time?
It's ancient programming. It really comes down to a survival instinct.
Survival.
Think about it. For our ancestors, prediction was survival. Predicting the weather, predicting where the food would be, predicting where the predator was. That was life or death. The brain is just hardwired to want certainty because not knowing used to mean real physical danger.
It was a brilliant piece of evolutionary software.
It was, for that world.
But the hardware hasn't really updated for this one.
Precisely. The external predator is gone for most of us. The saber-toothed cat isn't outside the door. But the internal predator, anxiety, that's still here, and it's so much more insidious.
It doesn't chase you with claws.
It chases you with questions. Am I on the right path? What if I fail? What if I lose my status? Did I make the right choice?
And the brain, it reacts to those questions as if they're a real physical threat.
That's the key. That's the disconnect. Your body goes into fight or flight over an email or a thought about the future. And since you can't physically run from the thought, what if I'm not good enough? You just get trapped.
You're in a constant invisible battle.
Exactly. And that's what we feel as chronic tension. We're exhausted because we're always on guard against a threat that can't be defeated physically.
And that's where the ego steps in. The conscious I. It sees this tension and says, I can fix this. I'll define everything.
The ego demands order. It needs definition, clarity, because it hates, truly hates ambiguity.
Why?
Because ambiguity makes the ego feel small or useless. I mean, if the world is just chaotic and uncontrollable, what's the point of all the ego's careful planning? So to fight that feeling of being small, we spend enormous energy trying to control everything.
Our work, other people, our own emotions.
We build this massive, intricate scaffolding of control around ourselves.
But it's an illusion.
It's a complete illusion of power, and it's built for one reason: to avoid touching that very humbling truth that we do not, in fact, control our lives. Maintaining the scaffolding is, I think, far more exhausting than just accepting the helplessness in the first place.
So while the ego is busy building this scaffolding, what happens to the other parts of us?
Yeah.
The soul, the self, whatever you want to call it. And you mentioned this inner disconnection that happens.
When the ego dominates, it gets bigger, and the soul gets quieter. The ego wants to be in charge. The soul just wants to be experienced. And the tragedy is you can become incredibly productive, climb the ladder, get all the external markers of success.
So perfect on the outside.
Perfectly ordered. But inside, there's this hollow feeling, the silence of the ignored soul.
And they're seeking two totally different things, aren't they? The ego and the soul?
Completely. The ego needs plans. a rigid linear map to a guaranteed result.
It's all about the destination.
Yes. The soul, on the other hand, it couldn't care less about the plan. It wants meaning. It wants the experience of the journey. The ego is happy when the project is done and the check clears. The soul is happy when you are fully present while you are creating, regardless of the outcome.
I've seen that so many times. Someone works for a decade to get the house, the job, the partner.
Yeah.
They get it, and then there's this vertigo, this feeling that the thing they wanted doesn't actually deliver the feeling they were promised.
Because the soul's hunger wasn't met. If you live purely by the ego's map, even if it leads you to a palace, you're guaranteed to feel a sense of meaninglessness. The soul wants to go through the unknown. The ego wants to know what's coming so it can avoid risk.
Okay, let's unpack that because that feels like the critical point. If all this effort to control is an illusion that just creates tension, what does it really mean to trust the process? How do you do that without just falling into passivity?
Or laziness. That tension point is the ego's last line of defense. Because the deeper resistance, it isn't just a fear of failing, it's the fear of losing your identity, the self that the ego has spent a lifetime building.
The fear of losing the self you thought you were.
Yes, the ego, that conscious sense of I am I, it's actually really fragile. It's obsessed with proving it exists and that it's stable. So when things crumble, a breakup, a job loss, the ego panics. It contracts and it starts putting up all these defense mechanisms to preserve its image.
But a huge part of that image, especially socially, is the persona.
The mask. The persona is the mask we wear to function in the world. And it's necessary, it helps us be professional, follow social rules. The problem isn't the mask itself.
It's when you think the mask is your face.
Exactly, when you identify completely with it. If your entire self-definition is the successful lawyer or the perfect parent, then any failure, any change feels like your very being is disintegrating.
It feels like annihilation.
It does. The ego isn't fighting change because it's inconvenient. It's fighting change because it thinks it's fighting for its life.
Which explains this cycle of resistance we see everywhere. We feel that fear, that ambiguity, and we flee from it.
We immediately try to plug the gap. We feel anxious, so we plunge into overwork. We feel lonely, so we sink into social media. We feel uncomfortable, so we slap on this label of forced positivity.
But every single one of those things, instead of freeing us, it just tightens the grip of resistance. I know I do it. The second I feel lost, I start planning harder.
It's the classic vicious cycle. The more you try to grasp life, the more it slips through your fingers. It's like trying to hold water, isn't it? The tighter you squeeze, the more you lose, and the more that justifies squeezing even harder next time.
So the ego builds its own prison, just trying to protect itself.
And it is exhausting. So much energy goes into keeping things in place that were never meant to be fixed. And while the ego is busy doing all this, what happens to the parts of us that don't fit that neat, polished image? The weak parts, the angry parts.
They become the shadow.
They become the shadow of the ego, the psychological basement where we throw everything we find unacceptable or shameful. It's the part of us that denies its own limits. It demands perfection, it demands certainty, and it can't ever be seen as weak.
But denying it doesn't make it go away.
Not at all. It's futile. Everything you deny in your conscious mind just retreats into the unconscious. And down there, it doesn't die. It becomes this powerful, living energy that is demanding to be expressed.
And that's when it erupts, as anxiety or a crisis.
It finds a way out. Through dreams, through a sudden panic attack, through irrational anger. The soul just can't be ignored forever. If you deny your need for rest, the shadow might express itself as a chronic illness. If you deny your anger, it might come out as passive aggression.
There's that great sun analogy for psychological development.
It's so useful. The ego's journey is like the sun's. The morning is its birth. It rises to its peak at noon. That's success, power, maximum control. But just like the sun has to set, the ego also has to set. It has to enter the darkness to learn surrender so it can be reborn.
But we resist that, especially in our culture. We want to stay at the peak of light forever.
We want to be eternally productive, eternally certain. But resisting the sunset just guarantees burnout and crisis. You can't stay at that noon peak forever. Learning to let go of that it's the real art of living.
Okay, so we're fighting this internal war against ourselves. But if the fight is the problem, what if the solution isn't to fight harder, but something else? What if it's just radical humility? What if the bravest thing to say is simply, I don't know?
That's the pivot. That is the shift from the psychological why of Jung to the philosophical how of Montaigne. He found this incredible relief and wisdom in just admitting ignorance. His whole starting point was that question, what do I know?
And he wasn't asking it to prove a point. He was asking it because he genuinely didn't know.
Exactly. For him, admitting you don't know wasn't a failure, it was a liberation. It lifts the burden of having to pretend to be correct and consistent all the time. Think about the pressure today to have a fixed, unchanging opinion on everything.
It's completely unnatural.
Montaigne offered the opposite. He embraced contradiction, he embraced inconsistency. He saw them not as flaws, but as essential parts of being alive. He allowed himself to be contradictory because the moment you define yourself, you stop growing.
That freedom to change your mind.
Yeah.
That feels revolutionary today.
He was a master of internal flow. He understood that the self is always changing. And instead of fighting that natural instability, he just embraced it. That acceptance of his own internal chaos was a radical form of self-acceptance.
And that self-acceptance, that acceptance of not knowing, is what kicks off the individuation process that Jung talked about. Uncertainty is the catalyst.
It's like fallow ground. It looks barren, empty. It's terrifying to the ego. But that emptiness is what's necessary for new growth. That's the beginning of individuation, where you start to detach from the collective mold, from expectations, and return to your own essence.
It's like that snake shedding its skin analogy.
It's perfect. If the snake holds on to the old skin because the process is vulnerable and painful, it suffocates. We do the same thing. We cling to the old identity, the old certainty, and we suffocate our own growth.
So letting go in this sense isn't passive resignation. It's not just giving up.
Absolutely not. That's just apathy. Conscious surrender is an active choice. You're not surrendering to fate. You're surrendering the illusion that you were ever in control. It's a recognition that there's a deeper intelligence at play, a natural flow that's bigger than the ego's plans.
It sounds like a kind of forced spiritual maturity.
It often is. Think about a midlife crisis. The ego builds a life for 20 years, and then it all feels empty. The ego thinks it's a failure, but really the soul is just forcing it to step aside so the true, wider self can finally emerge.
So if you can achieve that, how you act in the world must change completely. What does it actually look like to act from presence, not fear, when you still have to pay the bills?
It's the ability to act without needing to guarantee the outcome. It's doing the right thing, putting in the effort, not because it will lead to a certain victory, but because it's the right thing to do in that moment.
That's a very different kind of inner strength than just brute force planning.
It's the surfer analogy again, isn't it? The surfer doesn't fight the wave. He doesn't try to control the ocean. He'd be destroyed. He receives it, feels its rhythm, and aligns himself to right with it. He cooperates with this immense, uncontrollable energy.
So acting from presence means aligning with the moment, doing what's necessary, but without attachment to the result.
Exactly. And when you stop trying to dictate where life has to go, it starts to lead you where you need to go. And that is often a much more meaningful path than the one you planned.
That makes perfect sense. But here's the practical problem. The ego speaks the language of reason, of plans and logic, a language we all understand.
It's loud.
It's very loud. So if we're supposed to let go of that and listen to this deeper intelligence, how do we even hear it? What language does the soul actually speak?
It's a symbolic language. The unconscious doesn't speak in arguments or facts. It communicates in symbols, in dreams, in these vague but powerful emotions that we can't quite explain. Dreams are like letters from the self, trying to tell us something, trying to bring us back into balance when the ego gets too rigid.
So an image, like a house or a snake, it acts as a bridge.
It bridges the known and the unknown. We've sort of lost the ability to read symbols. We take everything so literally now. But for the soul, a symbol is packed with meaning. The sea is the unconscious. A journey is your life path. When these things show up, it's not random. It's the unconscious trying to get our attention.
That explains why a piece of music or a painting can just hit you so hard sometimes. You can't logically explain why, but it feels deeply true.
It's the subtle language of the self. If you dream you're trapped in a maze, the ego just feels fear. But symbolically, the unconscious might be showing you that you're clinging too tightly to one path, and it's inviting you to explore. It's not trying to punish you, it's trying to heal you.
And part of what it wants to show us is the shadow, the parts of ourselves we've abandoned.
The journey inward always leads you to the shadow, to the parts of yourself you deny, your greed, your weakness, your aggression. And paradoxically, that's where all your lost energy is.
We think of the shadow as being evil, but it's really just the unlived life, the parts we exile to fit in.
Yes, the parts we learn to hide as children to get love and acceptance. We hide our anger, we hide our vulnerability. The problem is those parts are still alive, they're still down there, and they have power. and they are waiting to come back.
And that often happens through projection.
The very powerful and very uncomfortable idea that we hate in others what we deny in ourselves. If someone's confidence just drives you crazy, that irrational irritation might be a mirror. It might be reflecting a powerful part of yourself you were taught to suppress.
So the intense emotional charge we feel towards someone else, it's not really about them.
It's about the internal dynamic they're showing you. They are, in a way, fragments of your own shadow, showing up in your life to help you see what you've forgotten. We are constantly interacting with our own projected shadow.
So how do you engage with that? With a part of yourself you spent a lifetime pushing away?
It takes real courage and honesty. You have to learn to dialogue with the shadow. So when an intense emotion comes up, like anger, instead of suppressing it or venting it, you just pause and you observe it and you ask it questions. What are you trying to protect right now? What need isn't being met?
That's incredibly vulnerable. You have to admit to the parts of yourself that you find contemptible.
But the goal isn't to eliminate them. The goal is integration. We're not trying to be perfect. We're trying to be whole. You need the darkness to see the light. Every time we accept a shadow part that we can be selfish or insecure, we expand our own consciousness.
And that's where true compassion comes from.
Yes, because you can only truly empathize with the darkness in others when you've touched it in yourself. Someone who is quick to judge hasn't sat with their own shadow yet. They're just projecting it everywhere.
And that whole dialogue forces you to be uncertain about yourself. You're not good or bad. You're just this complex, changing thing.
Which brings us right back to Montaigne. If you accept your own inconsistency, you stop fighting yourself.
Okay, that all sounds necessary. But here's the hurdle for me. How do we stop the mind from instantly judging what it sees? The moment I look at my own shadow, my insecurity, my pettiness, how do I stop that from just becoming harsh self-criticism?
That is the essential skill. That's what this all builds towards. It's developing non-judgmental self-observation, or what some call the witness attitude.
Okay, so how do we define that? How do you practice it?
It's the ability to stay with an experience, an emotion, a thought, without immediately labeling it as good or bad. Imagine you're watching a storm from inside your house. You just observe the rain, the wind. You don't judge it. You don't say the rain shouldn't exist.
And we have to apply that same neutral observation to our inner world.
Precisely. The mind storms. And our job is just to watch without trying to fix it or suppress it. And it requires a very subtle shift in language. Instead of saying, I am afraid, which makes fear your identity, you pause and you notice there is fear arising here.
That little bit of separation, it stops the emotion from swallowing you whole.
It creates distance. When you say, I am angry, you're trapped inside it. When you say anger is present, you've stepped back. You've become the observer. You're not a victim of your own mind anymore. You're a compassionate witness to it.
And that acceptance is what allows the flow. Judgment is resistance. Observation is acceptance.
And the paradox is, the more you try to escape an emotion, the more you judge it, I shouldn't feel this way, the more trapped you become. The more you just allow it to exist, the faster it dissolves, because you're not feeding it with the energy of your resistance anymore.
This acceptance of internal instability, that's Montaigne to a T.
Yeah.
His whole view on impermanence.
He was a genius at this. He saw that nothing is fixed. Our thoughts, our bodies, our certainties, they are all constantly in flux. And trying to live as if life should be this predictable, straight line, that's just a recipe for suffering.
So for him, strength wasn't rigidity, it was flexibility.
He had that great line, constancy is a virtue of mechanical minds. A mind that's always fixed, always certain. It's like a machine. It lacks the lightness of being human. The lightness we want comes from inner flexibility, from adapting.
So we should turn every crisis into a kind of laboratory for awareness, using that witness attitude.
When anxiety rises, don't argue with the thought. Don't get into the what-if loop. Instead, go to your body. Ask, what shape does this fear have? Where is it? Is it a pressure in your chest? A tightness in your throat? Observe the physical energy instead of the intellectual story.
A shift from the mind to the body.
And if you look deeply enough at any emotion, it becomes a doorway. Fear is hiding a desire for safety. Anger is hiding a sense of injustice. The witness attitude lets that understanding emerge on its own. It brings a kind of peace that doesn't depend on things being stable.
So to make this really practical, what are the key Montaignian tools we can use to cultivate this stance?
Well, first, we have to deliberately question our own absolute certainties, especially the ones about who we are. When you feel 100% sure about something, that's the moment to pause. That certainty is often just a defense against the discomfort of not knowing.
And second, the practice of writing.
Writing, just for yourself, it makes the internal chaos visible. Getting your doubts and contradictions down on paper, not to judge them, but just to see them. It helps organize your mind. Montaigne wrote to understand himself, not to impress anyone.
Third, a sense of humor about your own fragility.
Humor is essential. He didn't take himself so seriously. Humor is how you refuse to let your own perfectionism crush you. When the ego says you must be perfect, humor says, look at me, I contradicted myself 5 times today and the world didn't end.
And finally, solitude, silence.
Solitude was his greatest tool, not to be isolated, but for clarity. We need moments of actual silence. No phone, no input. It's in that pause that the mind can reorganize itself. It's when uncertainty stops being a threat and starts to feel like possibility.
So this whole internal revolution, letting go of control, talking to the shadow, watching without judgment, it's really a commitment to your own freedom, the freedom to be who you are, flaws and all, without needing all the answers. The peace we're looking for, it seems, doesn't actually depend on our circumstances at all.
We've gone through this deep psychological need to shed the ego's demand for control. But I wonder, when we finally do it, when we stop defining ourselves by plans and rules and we just allow ourselves to be in flow, does that freedom really make us feel more authentic? Or does the absence of a fixed point just leave us feeling fundamentally unsettled, still searching for a center that we know will never hold?